We have a video clip we're gonna pull up.
You like Huey Lewis and the News?
They're okay.
Their early work was a little too new wave for my taste. But when Sports came out in '83, I think they really came into their own, commercially and artistically.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think he's correct there. His whole review of our career is almost spot on. Hi, everybody, I'm Huey Lewis, and we're going to talk about all the albums from my career. Huey Lewis and the News, 1980. I'm going to say fast and small.
Fast, small, you get a third word.
And, I used and. We wanted it to be really immediate and live. You know, the sort of new wave thing was going on, and we didn't want to make a real kind of produced record, and I insisted on going in there and recording everything live and quickly. In retrospect, we probably should have spent a little more time. I think the record label wanted us to call it Huey Lewis and the News because they just wanted to brand it with a name, and they were trying to break us. The cover was meant to be a publicity shot. The back cover was what we had sort of envisioned for the front, which was kind of a lampoon of the Surfin' USA Beach Boys cover. Picture this, 1982. We're getting there. And these days, radio was king. And so the only avenue to success was a hit single. The first album didn't do very well. And this album, there was a little more pressure on us. We insisted on producing this record ourselves. And this was our first experiment with that. And we had our first legitimate hit. Well, the title came from in the album concept. It was a picture of me, and the title, Picture This, went with that. I have to embarrassingly admit I don't know who designed the logo. I just remember this is the first album that had our logo, and it's endured. This album was called Sports in 1983. Only 3 words.
Yes.
Got it right. Because this record was the record that assured us that we were going to be around for a little while. It was the 3rd record in our contract. It was a do or die record. And we had to have a hit single. We didn't know we were going to have 5 of them. We thought, we knew we needed 1. Well, the title came from, Huey Lewis and the News, Sports. And it occurred to me that most people's definition of sports, how they experience sports, was in a bar watching television. Yeah, Bennett Hall did that, and I was very hungover that day. I just remember I felt terrible all day long, and I thought, this is never going to work. And it turned out fine. It was shot at the 2 a.m. Club, which is affectionately referred to as the Deuce, in Mill Valley, California. And there's a lot of little things in there. The toilet seat guitar by Charlie Deal that hangs on the wall. He was kind of a legend in Mill Valley. On the television, we put up a picture of my pal Dwight Clark making a catch for the 49ers. Obviously, we come from San Francisco, so I've always been a 49er fan, Giants and 49ers. And in the 80s, we got to be pals with a lot of the players.
I wonder, are you able to talk about the lawsuit at all?
I can't talk about the lawsuit.
No, okay, nothing whatsoever.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Fore, 1986. Another big hit. I think we had Stuck With You as a #1 record. I think Jacob's Ladder was a #1 record. And Hip to Be Square was almost a #1 record. And also, when we released this record internationally, we were allowed to put Power of Love on the record. And it enabled us to tour everywhere, Asia and Australia and all of Europe. And so it was really our biggest record internationally. It's our 4th record, duh. We were all playing golf at the time, and it was just kind of a funny little deal. Call the album Fore, 4th album, Fore. Probably not a great idea, but as good as we could come up with.
And if you had to pick a new title, what would you choose?
Wow, a new title for Fore. I call it Hello World. The photo shoot was rather grueling, and most of the photos were kind of grim-faced. But our photographer, at one point, he said, "Is everybody happy with their feet?" We cracked up. That was just funny. We cracked up, he clicked the lens, and that's the shot. Interestingly, there's not a lot of stylistic difference between Fore and Sports, but Fore was not mixed by Bob Clearmountain. I think he was mixing Bruce Springsteen's record, and he was under contract and couldn't get away. Frankly, we missed Bob a little bit because Bob Clearmountain is such a wonderful mixer, and there are a few tunes on here that I think I would actually like to remix. Small World, 1988. Experimenting with rhythms. We felt like it was time to kind of stretch out, and we thought that exploring other rhythms, polyrhythms and sort of international rhythms would be a good idea because we'd all enjoyed that, and that's what Small World was all about. The title came from our lead song, which was called Small World, and featured the great Stan Getz. I know the photography was done by Jock McDonald. Jock took my shot for the album cover, and then I trotted in my wife and kids, and we did family photos on the same day. Well, stylistically, these songs were way different. More polyrhythmic, there was some kind of reggae things, there's jazzy flavored stuff, and it was not really a pop music record per se. Our next album was called Hard at Play, and it was released in 1989.
1991.
Close, right? Let's Rock Again. And the record label was so worried that we were going to kind of go jazz or something. And so we wrote a couple, rock and roll songs. The title was the last part of this record to come together. We had the record together, we had the album cover and everything, but we couldn't come up with a title. I thought about men, hard at work, and then I thought, well, what we do is not really work, hard at play. The album cover was shot in our little rehearsal studio at Joseph Court. We actually faked a rehearsal for the shoot, but this is where we rehearsed. We were just kind of going through the motions. Our next record was a tribute record, Fore Chords several years ago, 1994. Roots and News. This was the idea here. We were going to go back and find old kind of hidden gems and capture them. For the research process was just as much fun as the recording process because we listened to lots and lots of old time music. It was really pretty cool. Obviously, it's a taken from the great Abraham Lincoln speech, but that was it. It was just old rock and roll songs. This album cover is designed like a gig poster. This is what rhythm and blues posters used to look like advertising shows. Our next album was called Plan B, and it was released in 2001. 9-piece band. With the recording of Fore Chords several years ago, we hired a trumpet player called Marvin McFadden to play trumpet, and he was the only outside musician we used. But we put together a horn section to replicate that record, and we fell in love with that band. So we tried to, with Plan B, to write a record for that band. We called it Plan B because this is the record we would have made if Plan A hadn't worked out. The art was done by the record label. I don't remember if we suggested a collage or if they did, but we didn't have a lot to do with this one. There was no photo session involved, which is kind of nice, and they just kind of came up with it. There's not a lot of difference stylistically between Fore Chords several years ago and Plan B, but Plan B is all original songs, and Fore Chords was all cover stuff. We tried to write an original record for the band that we assembled, and that was really the fun of it. Our next record was another tribute record, Soulsville, 2010. Can't Go Where We Come From, that's Fore. I'll get it. Magic Memphis Memories. Well, the record was recorded in Memphis, and it's also our favorite music, rhythm and blues stuff from the Stax period, Otis Redding stuff, and Booker T and the MGs, some of the Aretha stuff. Because growing up in Marin County, and kind of under the umbrella of the psychedelic explosion, we as a band individually gravitated We wanted our kind of our own music, and we were the psychedelic backlash. We listened to KDIA in Oakland, which was a soul music station. So it really was a labor of love for us. Really, really a fun record to make. Well, the title came from the song, the Isaac Hayes song, Soulsville, which was a pseudonym for the ghetto. And we didn't know what we were going to call the record until we cut that song, and it kind of spoke to us a little bit. So we called the whole thing Soulsville. When we went to Ardent Studios to record the record, there were these wonderful pieces up done by a guy called Lamar Sorrento. And I said, who did this? And they said, oh, Lamar did. You got to meet him. He's around here. And sure enough, the next day I met him. He's a songwriter and an artist. And so we commissioned him to do the cover. And this is what he did. He's a wonderful artist and got lots of great folk art. You should Google him. And the exciting part about this record was we were able to hear the songs completely and rehearse them before we went in and recorded them with the horn section. That was a luxury that they didn't even have when they recorded. We did it in 2 studios with the horn section in one studio and us in the other, and we cut everything completely live. This is our brand new record. It's called Weather 2020. Really good stuff. I actually think, and this is a little presumptuous, I'm sure, but I think this is among our best work. We were quietly compiling 10 songs for another album over the last 12 years, and we had 7 of them in the can, and then my hearing collapsed. We thought, what the heck, let's share these songs with our fans. Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm not able to sing with a band. I can't hear music properly, so the object and the goal for me is to stabilize, to get my hearing to stabilize, and then figure out a way to sing. And I hope that happens, and I expect it to. I'm not giving up. I hate to have to describe this because I know you all know this, but Huey Lewis in the News, sports. Huey Lewis in the News, weather. Weather for a couple reasons. Number one, style wasn't going to play. And number two, we have had some heavy weather, at least with my health conditions and what it's done to our band and so on, so it seems appropriate. There's not much of a concept here for the album cover. It's just we wanted it to identify with San Francisco, something we've done forever. So we shot the album cover right there at Fort Baker, which is, where we all grew up. It's right in our hometown. This one's a kind of a return to basics for us. We were pretty careful with it, and we really kind of aimed a few of these things right at radio. So it was fun to work like that again. Okay, my favorite songs for my whole career are, I'm going to need a pencil and paper. Or do you want me to just hem and haw? Let's see, I'm going to say, Do You Believe in Love? Because that's the one that was our first hit. I'm going to say Heart and Soul, Want a New Drug, A Heart of Rock and Roll. We're not here for a long time, we're here for a good time. That's from our Plan B record. On stage, it's become just a rock of our set. I'm going to say Small World because of Stan Getz's unbelievable saxo. Small World Part 2. I'm going to say If This Is It, which might be my favorite song of all because it's a wonderful ballad and I love to sing it. I'm going to say Working for a Living, which has been just the workhorse of our set. While We're Young, which is a new song off our new album, which really is, I think, the best thing we've done in a long time. One of the Boys on our new album, which is autobiographical and really the most personal thing we've ever done. I'm going to say, how am I doing? How many more do I need?
I don't know. I think you're done.
I'm done.
Yeah.